Welcome to Build, Grow, Exit, a Prospera Ventures series. I'm Bianca.
And I'm Spencer.
And today we're going to talk about the number one thing that buyers are looking for. We often find that a lot of owners that are working in their business and founders seem to be a bit too close to their business. And we get it. Our business is our baby too. So we'd like to think that it's beyond measurable in terms of the value that we've created and what we've offered. Unfortunately, that is probably one of the biggest reasons that a deal may fail, because we're not actually looking at the tangible value of the business and how it can really transfer to the new owners. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And the number one thing that we find people are looking for as buyers, ourselves included, is predictability, or in other words, risk mitigation.
100%. When somebody's looking to buy a business, a lot of times, if it's not a trade buyer or a large private equity firm, they are essentially putting everything on the line, and it's going to be their new baby. And they're kind of, in a very real sense, they're risking, everything that they've built up to that point in order to take it over. And they want to know that the business is at least going to be making as much money as it is when they're evaluating it, when they close on it, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road. And I think as entrepreneurs and founders, we can get really caught up in the excitement of building something and occasionally forget that it only takes one of those large customers to decide to change what they're offering their customers. For example, if you're a B2B business, or it only takes one shift in consumer sentiment to really, impact the numbers in a business. And for us, it's like, hey, no problem, it's an opportunity. But for a buyer, that scares the crap out of them.
And you have to remember, most of the time, buyers aren't coming to table with necessarily all the cash up front. So they are talking to investment bankers, financial partners, equity partners, and they want to be certain that the money that they're giving to these people to buy the business and really help grow and support is going to be something that is generally predictable or a little bit less risk averse. So just think about it that way in terms of what this predictability that buyers are looking for.
I think that's a really good way to sum it up. And there's a ton of different things that roll up into that word, predictability, but I think we can really measure everything up against that.
Now, we've talked about this a little bit in some previous episodes in terms of starting with the end in mind. That's a big piece to the puzzle, because if you don't know where you're going, you're going to kind of just be wandering and getting whatever anybody brings to you.
If we can start from the end being a buyer purchasing the business, they want predictability and security in their new investment. And I think we can really reverse engineer that to break it out into a few different, however many numbers you want to... Categories. I feel like I'm rapping there. We can really break it down into a few different categories: financial, operational, and human resources.
Have you heard those categories before?
People, process, profit.
I mean, that sounds about right to me. I feel like this might be in a checklist somewhere too.
Maybe. Y'all should check it out. There's a link on our website, and I'm sure in the description below. Good checklist to have on hand, just to remind yourself what your goal is. Because these are really the three categories, the most important categories, that you need to create predictability in. You want to focus on revenue predictability. A buyer wants to, as I kind of started off with, be sure that the business is at least not going to lose money compared to what they're evaluating it at, and ideally continue to grow at the same rate that you've been growing at. And hopefully they can bring some even bigger opportunity to the table to build from there. Operationally, they want to be able to come in and understand how to operate that business. Processes, procedures, also known as standard operating procedures, SOPs, one of Bianca's favorite words, are super important, because it's ultimately the guidebook, it's the directions for your business. And it helps somebody who's coming in from the outside and doesn't have all the tribal knowledge that you do from building it to come in and be able to take the wheel. And of course, people, we want to have good team members when we're buying a business. Yeah. Of course, we want to have good team members if you start a business and build it too. And any buyer wants to be able to feel like they can count on the team that you've built, and that there's a good, strong people element within the business. And if those three things can be looked at and said, yeah, that's going to be stable when the next, when the next owner, when the buyer comes in and takes control, you're doing really good.
Yeah, no, that's a great high level summary of everything that I feel like we've been talking about throughout this whole series in terms of what's going to be the best way that you as an owner can get all of your hard work done in such a way that you can feel proud and walk away from. And I don't think anyone likes to walk into something that's chaotic. And if you can think of it that way, where if it's someone were to walk in on day one and just can't find anything, whether that's a person, a system, a number, whatever it is, then you're probably more a risky business than it is something that's a little bit more predictable. So I really hope, you utilize some of those checklists that we've outlined for you in terms of trying to figure out whether or not your business is really attractive or not to a buyer.
And just to double down on the starting with the end in mind piece, any one of the key areas of your business, just ask yourself, if somebody were to walk in tomorrow and I were to hand over the keys, as it were, and walk out the door, do I have confidence that the same results that I've been getting, they will continue to get? Will they have that predictability? And if the answer is, I think, make sure that you are very confident.
And I want to add just a really quick note that we're filming this and it's September. And I really want you to think through what your processes even look like on a year-to-year basis. Are you analyzing? And I think we'll talk about this in further series and episodes, but really think about when you're touching base with yourself, with your leadership team, what does that next year look like? Really come to an understanding of maybe where have you been and where are you going? Because I do think if you still have steps to take, especially when it comes to SOPs and predictability and trying to figure out if you are going to sell in the future, you do want to have a process in place to what you meet annually or quarterly about how things are going and maybe what steps you need to take, even if they're baby steps. You could be trying to plan a sale for 10 years from now, and there's still probably one or two things you can do on a yearly basis to make sure that you're getting to that goal that you've set out for yourself.
100%. And I think that's just good practice in operating any business. Things don't pretty much ever go exactly according to plan, but it's still essential to plan. It's essential to go through the process and the rigor of doing the yearly, quarterly, and then monthly, and once you get down to weekly, it's really just checklists, but to-do lists. But it's important to go through that exercise and to not slack off on it and to not get discouraged if your yearly plan doesn't come to the exact fruition that you planned on in the first place. Things change, and that's the beauty, for me anyways, that's the beauty of business. Life isn't boring. You get to do all kinds of new stuff with new people and learn new things and pivot and be creative, but it's still important to plan and have that eye for the future and go through the process.
All in all, we'd love to leave you all with a bit of a call to action in terms of checking out the worksheets that we mentioned. And we actually just added a new one. It's a glossary of M&A and business terms so that you can start really practicing and understanding about your business, about potential M&A transaction yourself. What are those common keywords that people are throwing out there, whether it's earnout or investment banker or, easy ones from buyer to COGS. You name it, I think we threw it on there, although I think there's probably a ton more we can add later on. This is just to get you started in understanding your own business and what that could potentially look like. So definitely take a look at the worksheets and guides that we've offered below.
I would recommend actually just going through those. I can't tell you how many acronyms were thrown at me when we first ventured into this world of M&A that made me feel like a fish out of water. So it's as in any industry, it's good just to get up on the jargon.
As always, like, share, hit the notifications button if you don't mind being annoyed by our wonderful series that gets loaded, and definitely follow us on social media to get any updates on business growth, strategy, and exit planning.
Bye for now.